It's been bone dry these past few weeks, is what most of us are saying as it pertains to Apple news, which has been few and far between. However, over the past couple of days or week or so, I don't know, I've lost track of time. I don't know what's going on anymore. There's been a little bit of news about the new MacBook Pro, and the picture that is being painted right now is one of a MacBook that's going to blow your socks off. So today we're going to talk about it. If you're anything like me, then there's a decent chance that you were, let's say, disappointed after WWDC. Maybe you made some promises that you regret making that you now have to fulfill. But the point is that now we're actually getting to a point where the new MacBook Pros, they gotta come sometime. So it can't be that much longer, right? And yeah, I know, there's always a billion different people in the comments that are like, well, you shouldn't have gotten so excited. Why do you care about all this new stuff anyway? Why can't you just be happy with what you have? Shut up, is what I say to that. I like it. You guys like it. It's exciting. We like talking about tech and what's new and what's fresh. This is Apple Silicon. This is a once in a 15-year transition. Of course we're excited. So if you're going to comment that, stop it. Don't do it. Okay, with that out of the way, let's talk about the news. So just a few days ago, on July 1st, we had an interesting report from Digitimes that is claiming that the new MacBook Pros are going to come out in the late third quarter of this year. They're saying that Apple is getting a bunch of suppliers ready for a production ramp of this new MacBook Pro to come out in 14 and 16-inch sizes in the late third quarter of 2021, which would, in this case, mean September. Now, this is a little bit strange to me because September historically is iPhone month. Now, that was not true last year, but then again, everything was weird last year, and I don't expect this year to be a repeat of that. So last year in September, the main event was the new generation iPad Air, which adopts iPad Pro design language and also unveiled the A14 chip, which of course was the foundation for the M1 chip. That's what the architecture that this has all been based off. However, this year I think it's unlikely that we would get another weird September, or certainly a MacBook Pro September, and I think it's really unlikely that we would have the iPhone and a new generation of MacBook Pro sharing an event. It just doesn't quite add up. So to me, late third quarter 2021 most likely means an October Mac event. That's definitely within the realm of possibility if you recall the current generation Mac Pro. Not the Apple Silicon one, but the design generation, which dates back to 2016, came out at the Back to the Mac event on October 28th, 2016. So I think if there is going to be a month for this new MacBook Pro to come out, October is probably it. This has been corroborated by leaker Dylan on Twitter, who says that the MacBook Pro 14 and 16 are definitely coming in Q4 of 2021. This is really, really interesting. Now, he also says that, like we've been saying for a little bit now, the M1X chip, which would be found inside of these MacBook Pros, will make its way to other Apple products. This makes a lot of sense. If you'll recall, for a couple of months, I've been talking about Apple's Mac lineup in tiers. So in the past, every single lineup had its own series of processor. The MacBook Air had the Y series, the 13-inch MacBook Pro had the U series, the 15 and then 16-inch had the H series, and then you had desktops and blah, 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 blah. But that's not really how we're going to think about things anymore. Right now, we have the M1, the base tier. So that's in everything from the entry-level MacBook Air, the entry-level iMac, the entry-level MacBook Pro, the entry-level Mac Mini. M1X would be a step above that. It makes sense. In fact, while we're on the subject of these tiers, a lot of the news has been focused on the MacBook Pro, the 14 and 16-inch model, but not a lot of people have been talking about the Mac Mini. Personally, I really don't see a reason for Apple to withhold the Mac Mini. I think if we are going to have an October Mac event to unveil the new MacBook Pro, it makes a lot of sense to unveil the Mac Mini at the same time. The idea that the Mac Mini will basically just be another shape of M1X is basically a guarantee, and I see no reason for Apple not to unveil that at the same time as the MacBook Pro. But we're really just scratching the surface of why this generation MacBook Pro is going to absolutely knock your socks off. But before we get to that, we have a word from today's sponsor. Salutations, viewers, it is I, Fancy Luke, and I'm here to inform you of a simply sensational promotional offer from my friends at WeVPN. If you haven't heard of WeVPN, it was created by some longtime industry veterans that left the big VPNs behind to make a simple, affordable, and trustworthy service that you can rely on. There are lots of VPNs out there, but WeVPN is laser focused on protecting your browsing without storing any data whatsoever. Now look, I'm a fancy guy, so I only watch Downton Abbey, but chances are you probably watch other things as well, and WeVPN's streaming unblocking gives you access to local libraries of over 350 streaming websites. WeVPN has a ton of great features, is easy to use, plus they support the channel. The summer sale is live now, so give it a try. A 2-year service plus an extra 3 months free is 74% off for just $2.59 per month. Plus, if you're fancy like me, then you can use code Luke for an additional 10% off with the link in the description below. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a gala to attend. Now, I also want to talk a little bit about the M1X because there was one thing that has been a little bit confusing. A lot of us had sort of assumed after the M1 came out that the M1X would feature a doubling of the performance cores. So whereas the M1 is 4 performance, 4 efficiency, we assumed that the M1X would be 8 performance, 4 efficiency. However, now it's coming to light that M1X is actually going to be 8 performance, 2 efficiency. And a lot of people are kind of confused about that. And when I say a lot of people, I mean me initially. Mark Gurman reported on this quite a while back, and it kind of struck me as weird. I was like, why would they remove efficiency cores? There's a couple of reasons I think Apple is doing this. Number one, keep the die size down. As you increase the core count, you increase the size of the physical die. And so if you remove those 2 efficiency cores and say, they can just use some of the performance cores some of the time, it won't be that big a deal. There you go. There you have a smaller die area, which means, of course, more room for additional GPU cores and less surface area to dissipate heat. But the most important reason that I think Apple is doing this is for future Apple Silicon processors. We've heard from multiple sources that future Apple Silicon processors could include 20 and 40 core CPUs, which are convenient multiples of the M1X. Even more interesting is that Mark Gurman actually said that that 40-core CPU would feature 32 performance and 8 efficiency, which is very strange. Why would you need 8 efficiency cores on a high-performance processor, especially one that is almost certainly going to be found in a desktop? Well, the most likely reason for that is that rather than developing entirely new dies, basically what Apple would be doing is just combining M1Xs. Whether that would be called, 4 M1X processors, or whether they would give it a new name, that remains to be seen, but certainly from a manufacturing standpoint, it's a lot more cost effective to essentially adopt a chiplet design. This is sort of what I touched on in my video about the upcoming Mac Pro redesign, which you should definitely check out if you haven't seen. We had some really amazing renders, but that is most likely what is going on. So why is this new generation MacBook Pro going to knock your socks off? We know a good bit about it so far, or at least we think we do. We know that it's going to be 14 and 16 inch. We know it's going to have a new design that looks similar to the iPad Pro design language, that it's going to remove the touch bar and bring back some ports. But there's one really, really interesting thing that I think is actually going to make quite a big difference. And that is this news that Apple is reportedly spending up to $200 million to improve mini-LED production. Mac Rumors broke the news reported by Digitimes that apparently Apple's working on 4 brand new mini-LED assembly lines. This is really, really big news because so far we have one mini-LED Apple product. It's the iPad Pro, and it has been just plagued really plagued with issues. I mean, the mini LED works fine, right? Obviously, this is Apple quality control, so they're not going to ship a product that's just woefully inadequate. But getting those quality control past mini LED panels has been hugely difficult. I mean, at the time that I'm filming this right now, I can go on the Apple Store and get a base iPad Pro with 0 options, and it doesn't ship until July 28th. That's a long shipping time. This is a product that has now been out for over a month, and it is still multiple weeks back ordered. That's how much trouble Apple is having manufacturing these displays. And so if they're going to be investing $200 million into producing these panels, that tells us that these are a technology that Apple is committed to. This is something that we are going to see in a lot more products. Believe me, if it was just the M1 iPad Pro, they would not be spending $200 million on 4 new assembly lines. This is a technology that Apple is committing to. And the fact that they're committing to this now, before we get these MacBook Pros, in fact, several months before we get these MacBook Pros, means it's pretty likely that Apple has figured out that they want to ship mini LED in 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros. And I'm really excited about that. I mean, you got to think of this in a holistic sense, right? $500 extra to spend from the M1 to the M1X. So for that, you're getting a lot of value added. You're getting a much more powerful and therefore more expensive processor, as well as a much better and therefore more expensive display. So how do you offset that? Well, you remove the touch bar. The touch bar is expensive. It's an OLED panel that's built into the top case. It's a very complicated thing to manufacture. So if you can remove that and replace it with function keys, you kind of hit 2 birds with 1 stone. Number one, all the people that hate the touch bar are satisfied because they don't have to deal with it anymore. And number two, you don't have to make it anymore. It's a lot cheaper to produce some little square plastic keys than to produce an OLED display. Well, that's just common sense. So where I think this is going to be the most interesting is the 14-inch MacBook Pro. I think it's going to be an absolutely killer product and probably the most recommended MacBook Pro that you'll be able to buy. You'll have a fresh, brand new design, which isn't functionally useful but would be very nice. More ports, less touch bar, 0 instead of 1, more powerful CPU on top of what is already the very powerful M1. Most likely the 14-inch will start with the 16-core GPU. You'd probably have to pay extra or jump to the 16-inch for the 32, but either way, very good. I think there's a decent likelihood that it would still have 8 gigabytes of RAM, but seeing as Apple doesn't like to have a ton of configuration options, 16 gigabytes is very possible. 512 gigabytes of storage, mini LED 14-inch display, more ports, the list goes on and on and on. And I, for one, am super, super excited. So if we do have to wait until October, maybe even shipping in November, oh, that would be terrible. Right now we're in the 7th month. The latest that we'll see it is in the 11th month, 4 months. That's what we're looking at here, at the maximum, okay? That's doable, okay? When we were in like April and people were saying end of the year, it felt like forever. I was like, we're gonna have to wait so long. There's people that really, really need to upgrade but don't want to buy a brand new 16-inch for $3,000 that's gonna be outdated. Like, obviously it seems like 4 months isn't that long, but if you need a computer right now, 4 months is a long time. My family member, I've got 2 family members waiting on these new MacBook Pros. One is using a 2013 13-inch MacBook Air. One doesn't even have a laptop right now. And so they're just kind of sitting there like, hey Luke, wow, when are these coming out? Because you don't want to buy a machine that you know is going to be outdated, right? Think of it in iPhone terms. Do you go out there, if you're a tech enthusiast, and buy a brand new iPhone 12 in August of 2021? Probably not. It's just generally common sense not to buy the latest iPhone within like 2 or 3 months of the next one coming out. The same thing applies with these MacBooks, except we don't know when they're coming out, and that's what makes it so frustrating for people. So hopefully we won't have to wait too long, and I believe that it's going to be worth the wait. I really do. I think these are going to be absolutely stunning machines and are much needed for Apple's next step in the Apple Silicon transition. So if you're just as excited as I am, leave a comment down below and let me know what feature you're most excited for. And with that, I will see you guys in the next video.